minds here. We have CIOs who, are probably worth their weight in gold. Uh, why are we? Why do we not have mainstream cloud? Why, especially when it comes to financial services, why is there still hesitancy?
So I'll put my two
Yes.
cents in
Yes,
from financial. I think one of the gentlemen who said he was in financials last night also put in there. I think regulation is one of the things. I think that's a big factor for banks. I don't know if there's any policy out in Kenya around, or regulation around cloud and banking and cloud. But there also would need to be some really tight contracts between cloud providers and financial organizations, because they are a custodian of information, and some very large information. And I don't know, there's always that worry of, well, when something happens, whose fault is it? Then there's the gray area, who's providing what security where. We want accessibility. So as you increase accessibility, you tend to decrease security, because these two things don't go hand in hand. The more flexible you want something, the more vulnerable you have to sort of make it, because that's just how life has made things.
So let's talk about regulation for 1 minute. I'm going to ask someone from the banking sector here. Allow me to pick someone instead of asking someone to raise their hand, because of the time we have. I think I see Michael from Oriental Bank. Michael, do we have a roving mic? A roving mic for Mike? I seem to be rhyming stuff today. Mike, could you tell us what are the requirements from a CBK perspective, from a Central Bank of Kenya perspective, in terms of what what software solutions that a bank can run in Kenya, and what is the banking association, the Kenya Bankers Association, doing about that to have a little bit more leeway, especially when we're in 2017 today. So resilience is critical for certain, but agility is also very, very key. How do you balance resilience, agility, and the fact that you have central bankers who may not be lockstep with you?
Morning, everyone. That was
Morning,
a very
Michael.
long question.
Sorry, can you guys hear Michael at the far end there? No, Michael.
Okay, sorry.
I'm sure we served you a good breakfast.
Yes, you did. Thank you.
Yes.
In terms of balancing agility and resilience, what I think even the central bank takes note of, not all solutions will be locally available.
Yeah.
And so you might be forced to pick a solution that's not locally built. Maybe it could be a cloud solution, it could not be a cloud solution. If it is a cloud solution, the issue is comes in along storage. This data, where could it be kept? I think in terms of compute as cloud, that should be okay. That shouldn't be an issue as long as the data still sits with you. But in cases where now this data sits on the cloud, for example, email and the such, generally banks do have a lot of sensitive documents within their emails, but they sit on the cloud and CBK has no issue with that. But then the data on the core banking and the customer data, which again also still circulates on email, there is some restriction on that.
Okay, so if I may ask you, today you have core banking solutions that reside on the cloud. I read last month about a new core banking solution that is based on the blockchain. What would be CBK's response to that, especially when it comes to not just banks, but the deposit-taking microfinance organizations that are coming up in the country? Have you sought any sort of response from the central bank on that?
Personally, on that, no, I've not. But I think the general idea with most bankers is that CBK is always on the defense with new technology. So the use of blockchain as a form of core banking could be something which I think KBA are trying with something. I think there was something mentioned with KBA sometime back, I don't recall. But it is something which sort of in R&D research stage.
So, coming back to my panelists, Dan, and I'm zeroing to you, Dan, and to Francis, because you are more in country than my two brothers who are roving ambassadors, all over the place. And you guys sort of represent the industry. How are you guys engaging with industry players to make sure that regulators and policymakers are in lockstep with you guys? Because ultimately, one of the big issues that we always talk about is you have enough on your hands fighting in the market to get market share. If you have to now expend more time fighting with regulators and policymakers who are supposed to be the organizations that make your life easier, how do you balance that? How are you engaging with your customers to ensure that regulation is lockstep with you guys? You want to go first, Dan? Yes, okay. Can you guys hear Dan? Can you switch it on? Is it on?
The mic is on?
Just use that mic.
Yeah, so I mentioned yesterday that really the very first advantage we have is the fact that the regulators are open to discussing these issues. We actually refer to them as emerging issues in the industry. So really, we are speaking to the regulators, be it CBK and be it CAK, and even the ministry, and a lot of all the players and stakeholders who, in one way or the other, get affected by the kind of services or technologies that we want to offer in the market. We make sure that there is, number one, lobbying from our end so that we make sure we are protecting our business interests. So we are, like just the other day, we were having a policy review in terms of the ICT Policy Review 2016. We were actually part of the team, and we were given slots to make sure that we aired what we felt were our challenges, but not only that, we also aired what we thought was very good industry best practice that we thought they could actually borrow from. The other thing that I would also want to share is the fact that other than us speaking to them openly and sharing with them whatever we need to, whatever we think is best, we also try the much we can to, number one, appreciate where they're coming from. So the regulators really have a point. And again, that is where I now get out of the organization I work for, and I look at myself as Dan. And when I do that, then really I'm very much sure that the regulator has my best of interest at heart. Whenever we do that, then again, we remain objective to listen to them so that we can get to hear what they have to say. Of course, there's a big concern in terms of our skill capacity, especially on matters info security. What we do, I can share this as a way of example for the organization I work for. We acknowledge the fact that there's a skill gap in that. And what we do really is to engage third-party security solution providers and security experts to, number one, come and do their own independent assessment of as to our security systems and controls, and also to proffer solutions that will make us achieve or make sure that we are really compliant as to meeting the security requirements, both from a technology, from a process, and also really just to make sure that there is at least that basic awareness of that which we need to do. I was just reading through some article the other day around, because again, we always have to be wary of what's happening in the industry. And I noticed Kaspersky is already talking of an attack on something that is attacking the cryptocurrencies and even the blockchain. They call it crypto shuffle or something like that. That is just a basic awareness that we also have to appreciate, and we also have to make sure that there's a very close connection between ourselves and really the security service providers, so as to make sure that we can protect our customers and even protect our own data assets.
Francis?
Yes. We have also participated in several of the ICT policy initiatives, and we take them up to the end. You know, we start together and we get to a place where they become papers for implementation. And as to implementation, it has always been a thing that we are not able to control. So I see that what really lacks is enough success stories to propel the policy makers as to what successes they could achieve with, you know, with these clouds. So much so that when they lead us in meetings, we see that there isn't, you know, real experiences. A lot of people who are doing cloud are not coming upfront to give those stories, so that those stories can help us to drive the appetite within the policy framework.
Great. Christo, talk to us a bit about security in relation to digital transformation. Usually what happens in organizations is that the guys who are driving lots of innovation are also considered not to be very security conscious. How do you balance the two?
No, absolutely. I think first and foremost what we need to realize in digital transformation, and specifically the adoption of cloud, is that the traditional walls and moats approach has disappeared. I mean, every single cent that you've spent in information security in your on-premise solution is fundamentally disappearing if you go through this digital transformation, because everything becomes virtual. I think we live in a world with software-defined networks. I mean, moving assets into the cloud. I mean, those traditional approaches lack significantly. So if you, I think I've mentioned and I touched on it earlier, fundamentally follow the asset. I think organizations are very nervous, back to the cloud adoption question of, you know what, if you don't get the regulation right in your own environment, if you don't get that security challenge right in your own environment, what makes you think you're going to wave a magic wand in the cloud and it's going to disappear? It's not going to disappear. It's how well and how mature can we together work with the digital transformers and the cloud adopters or the cloud providers, and fundamentally back to Francis's point, it's not for me about those use cases, and it's more for me about the fundamental element about trust. I mean, trust, methodically speaking, is a sequence of events that leads to an expected outcome. It's about the two, the provider and the customer, trusting one another that, listen, we're going to go on this journey and we're going to mutually have success at the end of the day. And also admit one another's flaws. I mean, information security is a living, breathing thing. I experience day by day by day by day that the CIO is 2 steps behind the organization's requirement for ICT, specifically when it gets to security. You're not unique in that position. I mean, it's a living, breathing thing. You need to work together with your peers and your providers to fundamentally get to that green state.
Thanks, Christo. I will take 3 questions from the audience. 3 questions. Josephine?